We are joined from Middlesbrough by the Shadow Transport Secretary, Andy McDonald. Thank you very much for being on the show today, Mr McDonald. We heard from Stephen Barclay a little earlier, the Brexit Secretary, who says he thinks there is a landing zone for a Brexit deal. Is that something you welcome?
Well, I don't know what that is, because we are told that negotiations are underway and conversations are being had. But we heard from Amber Rudd that the effort is focused on crashing out with no deal, and Leo Varadkar and others in the European Union are saying that they are aware of no proposition from the UK government. So if you'd like to tell us what that landing zone is, at the moment the landing zone that we do know about is described in the Yellowhammer documents, which is complete havoc across our country. So we need to know what it is he's talking about.
We will know, of course, that the Labour Party wants to avoid a no-deal Brexit. If the government does bring back a deal, is there any chance that Labour might actually support it?
Well, I have to see what the deal is. But at the moment, Boris Johnson is telling us that he is not going to ask for an extension, and it seems that all of his energy is about delivering a no-deal crash-out. And that's the thing that we've got to focus on, and to make sure that doesn't happen. And we say, let's get that extension according to law, and we've got no confidence that he'll abide by the law, and that once we have that, let's have that general election, and we'll have a referendum. Our promise will be to have a referendum in that, where the people decide on the future relationship with the European Union. That seems to me the most pragmatic way to go about this issue, and of course that's Jeremy Corbyn giving that lead, trying to hold the entire country together, with the only party trying to unite the country and address the real issues that they're facing on a daily basis, rather than having splitting one way or the other.
Labour, of course, voted against an election when that was put to Parliament. So when do you want the election to be?
I want us to have that election when we've got this whole issue of the crash-out nailed down, and absolutely beyond doubt that we will not be crashing out without a deal on the 31st of October. And
so after
we
the
don't
31st?
know that yet. Well, after we've got it absolutely clear, if it would be beyond doubt the moment that Boris Johnson writes that letter and makes that request, as he is bound to do according to law. The Act of Parliament that was passed laid that out in the appendix, and he simply has to attach his signature to that letter, and if he does that, then we're in the business of moving on to a general election. And
what if he doesn't? Because what he's saying at the minute is that no matter what happens, he's going to take the UK out of the EU by the 31st of October. Yeah.
Well, there's already a petition to the Court of Sessions, and I think people are looking at the alternative ways to progress that. It would be an absolute parlous state of affairs if the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom decided that he wouldn't abide by the law of the land. We would be into a bind constitutionally if that was the case, and we'd have to have the ability to override that to make sure that the Prime Minister could not just simply ignore and disobey the law of the land. Now, I know that there's a disregard for our judges, and that worries me greatly, because we must always uphold the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. But I strongly suspect that that will be one of the options for the judiciary to enter into the fray, and we'll have that decision made in any event. There may be other techniques as well, perhaps others signing that letter other than Boris Johnson, so he can satisfy himself that he hasn't asked for the extension, but it's been requested in any event, and the European Union have granted it. So there's many a twist here, Sophie, between now and the 31st of October.
It does feel that whatever happens, a general election is going to happen sooner rather than later. In that election, people are going to want to know exactly what the Labour Party stands for. So members of your shadow cabinet have said you plan to renegotiate a deal and then put that deal back to the people in a second referendum. So in that referendum, would you campaign to leave or to remain?
My personal view, I would do again what I did last time. I would campaign to remain. I would vote to remain. I just came away from a meeting in my locality with the chemicals and process industries. And I heard Steve Barclay talking about the continued investment in UK industry. I've got to tell him that there are really worrying signs that these businesses are poised to take their businesses elsewhere if they are facing tariffs of raw materials in and finished products out and delays to their systems. If those tanks drop, they'll talk about shutdowns. They're multinational companies. They will just relocate where they don't have to have those problems. And we know from our car factories that they're looking to build future lines elsewhere. Nissan have made their own announcements. So the effects will be catastrophic. So it's absolutely imperative that we do stop that. And that's what I'm saying, that my region in particular will be one of the hardest hit by a disruption from the European Union. And it'll be jobs. And as ever, people like Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, when they smash the ship against the rocks, they'll have the lifeboat. It's the working class who will not. They're the ones who will pay for it with their jobs and their prosperity. And that's the deceit that Boris Johnson's trying to perpetrate upon the British people at the moment. And we've got to expose that for the deceit that it truly is.
I'm just trying to get my head around what you said at the beginning of that answer, which is that the position is that you would try and renegotiate a deal, and then you say that you would then campaign to remain against the deal that you just negotiated. I mean, why would the EU do anything to try and negotiate a deal if you're saying you just go and campaign against it?
No, think about it. You know, if we're putting this back to the people, for them to make the decision, the option of leaving is available to them. It makes absolute sense to get the best possible deal that will be the least disruptive to our economy.
But why
it's in
should
our
the EU
interests,
give you
and it's
that deal?
Hang on, it's because it's in their interests too.
But when
it's
you then just go and campaign
beneficial
against it?
No. Listen, it's just if you've got the option to remain, that's straightforward. We know what that means. If we've got a credible deal, it means that we're trying to mitigate and minimise the impact of leaving the European Union. The European Union would want that. So should the UK. We should not be rushing headlong into a disruption from the EU and then suddenly throw ourselves into the arms of Donald Trump with all of the consequences of a trade deal that's going to totally and utterly favour the USA. When we have our conversations with the European Union, this isn't about the football match or who wins, who loses. This is about working with our partners to find the best possible relationship going forward. I'm of the view, and I've always been of the view, that remaining in the European Union is that better option. But we will put it back to the British people, and if they decide to leave, then of course it should be on terms that are going to protect our jobs, protect our economy, the environment, consumer rights, and the whole range of issues that we're so concerned about. That makes absolute sense, and it's a way of holding the entire nation together, and that's the path that we're going to follow.